3, 2, 1.
The People's Billionaire, a true captain of industry, a prolific tweeter, the ultimate savior of humanity. These are all epithets given to a certain son of a Canadian model and a South African engineer. He started as just another software entrepreneur in the dot-com bubble, but has ascended to become perhaps the best encapsulation of the information era zeitgeist. He's idolized by countless teens, mindlessly praised and defended because he seems to treat the world like a stage, and like any good show, the average viewer often sees a bit of themselves in their favorite lead. Perhaps they see what they could have been, what they most want to be, or they see sins that they too have, instead being celebrated, embraced, excused. It's hard to fault people for hope. But at one point, everyone must come to terms with the inherent inequity and intrinsic cruelty of the world, along with the imperfections of its creatures. You would think with how cliché that enunciation of a black and white worldview is that we as a society would have moved on from that, from such barbarism. But we haven't. No matter where you look, no matter what website you choose to examine, you will find a never-ending back and forth as Musk is tugged toward the pedestal of supreme internet idolization. Claims about emerald mines and phony dreams of Mars are thrown around, and words fly back and forth like robber baron, genius, extortion, and catgirls. Lots and lots of catgirls. Overwhelmingly though, with the amount of positive reinforcement and idolization he receives, Musk could be considered the patron saint of the internet, or at the very least of Reddit, despite being the 5th richest person on the planet, a position that typically doesn't come without controversy. I was going to originally title this The Rise and Fall of Elon Musk, but to be quite honest, I don't think he's fallen quite yet. Maybe he's begun a downturn, but fallen he has not. It was in the research for this video that I realized all the hate I was observing around him, pre-corona especially, was actually a vocal minority. So forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to assume you've had enough with stories about this billionaire's upbringing, about how his life could make an inspiring film, about how he acts like such an alpha on Twitter, and how he's going to revolutionize industry and human civilization as we know it. I mean, even the early life section on his Wikipedia page seems framed, at least for a Wikipedia article. Instead, let's examine if there's truly any merit to the claims made against his character, because, after all, if you can only regurgitate it's intrinsically immoral to be a billionaire, and the phrase apartheid money, what are you trying to accomplish? Only people who already dislike Musk will understand the genuine, deeper issues you're implying and sympathize. Others will accuse you of mindlessly parroting unverified information. But the state of argument and debate on the internet is calamitous. In the absence of being able to physically shout obscenities, the reply section on any of Musk's contentious tweets typically devolves into monkeys slinging rhetorical feces at each other, with no intent of actually changing minds, just trying their hardest to rile the other side up, at least for the most part. You will only find in-depth looks on other sides' points of view in their enclaves. So, my goal in this video is to break down these walls, to examine the hostility. Is Elon Musk actually a terrible person, an imperialist, an apartheid billionaire, the true embodiment of the vices of capitalism? Is the hate justified? Let's take a look at some of the allegations against him so that whether you're a diehard fanboy or a staunch opponent of Musk, you can at the very least form an informed opinion. First, we must start at the beginning. Most articles paint the young Musk as a boy genius, which isn't actually that inaccurate as he started picking up programming at 10, selling a game he wrote in BASIC at 12 for $500, splashing right into Silicon Valley after college, where he then seemed to be a part of project after project until he had quite a bit of a nest egg in his late 20s, of course including his PayPal payout. Many take the angle of adversity too, focusing on how he worked through college and his experience with some vicious bullying. I will use that second example for the first issue I want to point out to the proponents of the billionaire. The Musks, much like, say, Julius Caesar, are largely in control of the way they're perceived. I don't mean the persona Elon presents on Twitter, that too. Instead, I mean how he and his family paint themselves as so-called wanderers and adventurers facing adversity. My mother was born and raised in South Africa, and from her stories I know that the tale of Elon ending up hospitalized for a week from bullying is not outlandish and probably true, but I just mean to remind you that nearly all of the tales of Musk's early life come from the Musks, mostly from Elon himself. What I'm trying to say is best summed up in this example. I find it unimaginable that anyone, especially the CEO of a very capital-driven company and the holder of a very financially influential Twitter account, is going to respond to, say, the Emerald Mine allegations with, "Yep, you got me." I only make a point of this because many defending the billionaire tend to offer up explanations in the form of Musk testimony, which is flawed. So what was his childhood like? Was he the product of institutionally racist privilege? It is a common misconception that Elon Musk is some sort of South African phoenix rising from a troubled country to become the modern American business magnate he is today. But it's also not entirely true that he was a spoiled child, the product of so-called apartheid wealth. He was certainly granted opportunities that many people did not have access to in his early life though, as he grew up in the whites-only elite modern segregated city of Pretoria and went to one of the best secondary schools in all of Africa, at least South Africa, the all-white Pretoria Boys High School. Look, I will grant it is not his fault that he was born into the height of apartheid, but it's certainly worth mentioning that he grew up in a mind-bogglingly recent brutal system of institutional racism. And the notion that his father is wealthy is not something that should be disputed. Much like his son, he was an entrepreneurial engineer, which was already extremely lucrative as a white specialized Afrikaner. He also sought profit wherever it could be found, like for example in the tale of how Musk Sr. came to, quote, own an emerald mine. Let me give you a quick rundown of the story. Since brevity is the soul of wit, I will be brief. He was flying a plane himself to Britain to sell, but due to a religious holiday upping the price of landing at the airport he planned on stopping at next, he was grounded for some time. This grounding eventually led him to stumble into a group of Italian businessmen who bought the plane and offered the sale of a half share of a Zambian emerald mine, which Musk Sr. was inclined to accept. And so, for the next 6 years, with half the ownership and a morally questionable money printing machine, he bathed in opulence and absurd wealth from the labor of Zambian miners. So this sounds like an open and shut case, right? Well, at the age of 17, he fled South Africa against his father's wishes, and even if his father did support him after that, being in the top 2% of 1970s South Africa in terms of wealth did not actually translate very well to US dollars, especially considering the magnitudes of debt Elon would accrue in pursuing a total of 3 degrees. But another well to that well, because there is evidence and testimony that Musk Sr. did contribute a sizable amount of investment to Musk's first big financial success, Zip2, and the fact that Elon tries to downplay this as being less than the 28K reported and coming later on should be taken how you want it to be taken, but I again want to remind you that that's just coming from the mouth of Elon. I could not find any evidence that Musk Sr. supported Elon in Canada and America before this, though. So to an extent, yes, Elon's intelligence, however abnormally large it is, was allowed to flourish as his father funded his first computer and elite secondary education. It's really an intangible and subjective issue as to whether or not you can actually claim that this gave him the toolset to succeed for the rest of his life, meaning to imply that he was built on apartheid money and opportunity. Having laid out the facts, I will leave that for you to decide. I just wanted to clarify where the apartheid and emerald mine allegations are coming from. Instead, it's what he did with his upbringing under an intrepid merchant father that is truly the popular cause for concern. It's what he's done with his platform, what he's doing to his workers, his engineers, to the people he's flattened under his boot in his trudge forward. All allegedly, of course. Moving on. Let's go down the next few grievances in no particular order. Accusations of exploiting child labor towards the South African billionaire are probably the most abhorrent, if true. Wait, I have to find out if they're true or not. Alright, give me a sec. Okay, The Democratic Republic of the Congo, despite being one of the poorest countries in the world, produces about 2/3 of the cobalt in global markets. But in these mines, there are children as young as 7, and none of the adult or child miners wear face masks that could prevent them from inhaling cobalt dust, which could lead to a potentially fatal lung disease. Mines collapse frequently, burying people underground. No one knows the exact figure, but UNICEF estimates that 40,000 children work in mining across the south of the DRC where cobalt is found. And this isn't just some bystander's observations about a stagnant issue that doesn't seem likely to change. Back in December, 14 Congolese families began to move forward with a suit against multiple industry giants, including Tesla, for use of cobalt mined on child labor. And that's child labor in toxic, hazardous conditions, for often less than $3 or even $2 a day. Well, the case is still ongoing, and I don't think it's a disputed fact that Tesla has and still is using cobalt mined by Glencore, who sources their cobalt from mines in the DRC. Defense of this ends up in 2 main arguments. 1. Tesla and Elon have made promises that they have done their due diligence and will eventually phase out cobalt, but it doesn't seem like that's the case as of June and the foreseeable future, as Tesla and Glencore have struck a massive deal on cobalt. I can't really fault people for the second defense though, because, well, as I said, the DRC sources 2/3 of the world's cobalt, so what's often brought up is that it tends to get rather hard to actually perform due diligence, as most modern cobalt-containing batteries can eventually be traced back to the DRC. So really, what action is there for Tesla to take? Well, there was a flare-up of this issue back in 2017 spearheaded by Amnesty, but as far as I can tell, the Responsible Cobalt Initiative formed in response back then has yet to be joined by Tesla. And still, they're making massive deals with Glencore, who, fun fact, are also in the child labor suit alongside Tesla. But I still don't find that answer very satisfying, so I'll just say this. Tesla says they've done what they can, but I can't find a non-Tesla source to say that that's even true. But what can they do other than deny allegations? Is the degree of thoroughness expected in their cobalt investigations unreasonably high, considering that the average American still buys from mega retailers that use child labor too? That's up for you to decide, but the facts of the matter remain that they have definitely used so-called artisanal cobalt in the past and are ramping up production of cobalt in general as we speak. Elon is irrefutably a union buster. He was convicted in California for illegally sabotaging employee efforts to form a union. That includes letting security guards harass workers who are passing out union pamphlets in the parking lot, banning employees from wearing pro-union t-shirt and buttons, repeatedly interrogating union organizers, and eventually firing one of them. The story of that employee could not be any more transparent. He does a fine job for years, the workers collectively resist some new policy change, and then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, that employee trying to organize the union is rated suspiciously terrible, resulting in his termination. Well, that sounds like a classic conspiracy theory, right? No, his supervisor confirmed upper management was reaching over to lower his scores. I mean, Tesla being so adamant about busting unions, in a way, proves that they're scared of the demands they could make. It's almost like a confession of their other sins, as if it wasn't terrible enough to be a union buster, and that isn't an isolated case. The air at Tesla is described as so anti-union that it gives me the impression that walking into the Gigafactory with a pro-union shirt on is a lot like being the protagonist during the rising action of a young adult dystopian novel. That is to say, you'd be treading on very thin ice. But I feel I should at least mention that I've seen many people, including Musk himself, denounce unions on the whole, not only saying they have no place in the 21st century, but that they are actively detrimental to the companies they oppose too. Musk even alleges that the United Auto Workers organization paid the aforementioned employee to infiltrate and agitate Tesla workers to join the union, something that is perfectly legal by the way. So it would be foolish of me not to address this in the first draft of the script and have to painstakingly recreate the recording setup I used so that I don't sound that different when I read out what I tacked on later. But claim after claim he's made against them have been proven to be a stretch at best, like saying that the 2008 recession didn't cause a company to close, instead the UAW union did, which is entirely false. Ultimately though, I personally find it compelling that outside of unions and maybe press attention, there's not that great of an incentive for companies to be held accountable, reinforcing the importance of these organizations. Well, what other sins is Tesla afraid of, you might be asking? It's widely thrown around that Tesla Gigafactories are notoriously terrible places to work, but let's examine why that might be the case. In no particular order, the claims begin with a racially hostile environment. One ex-Tesla worker alleging that the not-so-nice word was thrown around by his supervisors. The claims aren't limited to just one incident either. There have been allegations in the past made that the bathrooms are graffitied with previously well-meaning symbols of Indian origin that bear a resemblance to windmills, and other African-American workers have independently come forward with their own not-so-nice word allegations, and extremely not very nice caricatures were even scribbled on the walls by supervisors. Most of the time, the perpetrators and bystanders wrote off these acts of race favoritism as jokes, and despite the HR department accusing these workers of making up stories, Elon actually addressed these horrific acts in an email saying that, well, he uses wording where I don't have to worry about demonetization, so thanks, but he referred to this racism as, quote, being a jerk to, quote, historically less represented groups. And if the perpetrators apologize, the victims should just be, quote, thick-skinned and move on. Musk's seeming conflation of office pranks gone wrong with degrading African-American employees by using the not-so-nice word is just inexcusable in my opinion. You cannot say that these discriminatory practices are not Musk's fault when he fails to exercise his power to punish those responsible, or at the very least make it known that further discriminatory acts will result in more than a slap on the wrist. It's also worth mentioning that discrimination based on gender and sexuality run rampant, but if I wrote another section on that, it would sound the exact same, with the same conclusion of Musk recommending that people just grow thicker skin. Tesla's gigafactories don't exactly offer the cushiest of jobs either. Let's go for a change of pace from my condescending voice monotonously explaining the facts, and instead I'm just gonna fire off some quotes of Tesla workers and other reports about gigafactory conditions in a lightning round. I've seen people pass out, hit the floor like a pancake, and smash their face open. They just send us to work around him while he's lying on the floor. Preventable injuries happen often. In addition to long working hours, machinery is often not ergonomically compatible with our bodies. Add a shortage of manpower and a constant push to work faster to meet production goals, and injuries are bound to happen. A few months ago, 6 out of 8 people in my work team were out on medical leave at the same time due to various work-related injuries. I hear that ergonomics concerns in other departments are even more severe. A frustrated Musk once fired a random engineer who didn't really have any liability on the spot because he was upset that some of the robotic components in the assembly lines stopped working. Most Tesla production workers earn between $17 and $21 hourly, but the average auto worker in the nation earns $25.58 in an hour and lives in a much less expensive region. Quote, there have been plenty of times that I had to pick between eating or using the bathroom. Recently, every worker was required to sign a confidentiality policy that threatens consequences if we exercise our right to speak out about wages and working conditions. Sanchez has 2 herniated discs in his neck and is on disability leave from work and can no longer grip a pencil without pain. You can make it through Monday, Sanchez said. You can make it through Tuesday. Come Wednesday, you start to feel something. Thursday is pain. Friday is agonizing. Saturday, you're just making it through the day. Proper precautions like bright yellow coloring and forklift beeping are typically drastically reduced at the gigafactories, citing Elon Musk's distaste for the color and the noise, respectively, of course. If workers are assigned to light-duty work because of an injury, they are paid a lower wage as well as supplemental benefits from workers' compensation insurance, a practice that Tesla said was in line with other employers and California law. Quote, I went from making $22 an hour to $10 an hour, said a production worker who injured his back twice while working at Tesla. Quote, it kind of forces people to go back to work. He lost his apartment when he was assigned light-duty work that paid a significantly lower wage. He had to sell most of his belongings to make ends meet and still deals with pain and numbness in his legs. Quote, I don't go out, he said. I hardly see my friends. It's depressing to have them see me like this. I can't walk for 10 minutes without getting winded and having to stop and sit down. When I have to go to the stores, I have to use one of those electric scooter carts, and I don't want that. Look, I could go on, but this point is best summed up by what an industry-established engineer had to say about Tesla's process. I came from a background where process was a good thing. At Tesla, the time it took to say the word process was too long. I have to give it to Musk. He really makes it seem like he actually cares. In the script of this video, I was actually preparing to redeem him here. I figured that his phony email about not-so-nice words heavily contrasted with the way he seems to be adamant that he tries to meet factory workers about their injuries, meet with the safety board about ergonomics, and that he even slept in a sleeping bag on the factory floor. He's even expressed desires that he wants his factories to be completely automated. I should have seen it for the performance it is though. After Tesla drew flack and controversy about the injuries a few years back, an independent third party moved in to take a closer look at the suspiciously lowered injury rates that the company was beginning to report, and wouldn't you know it, they were failing to report some pretty serious injuries, like one man who got horribly sick from inhaling toxic glue fumes. So while this report might be 2 years late, I think it serves a more important role than actually highlighting the discrepancy between Tesla's reported and actual injury rate. It strips Tesla and Musk of any trust they deserve. I think once you fudge numbers like that and it doesn't lead to massive repercussions, it brings to your attention that Tesla has always been driven by public perception. That's how it gets funding. Should I even mention that Musk has denounced that investigation into their actual injury rate? The Musk empire has everything to gain from its dismissal, and Reveal, the company behind it, had very little to gain from spreading the truth. I'm not saying it's impossible that Musk is genuine but powerless and also right about the study being defamatory. I'm just saying that the narrative stands to benefit Tesla astronomically more than what Reveal has to gain from conducting a third-party investigation and report. I find it hard to argue against the fact that Elon Musk acts like a petulant child online. The real argument typically boils down to whether or not that he should be excused of this because he's a misunderstood genius billionaire Byronic hero. Is there much to be said here? I'm practically filibustering right now so that the compilation can keep going. No, Elon Musk should not get a free pass for being a prick. Actually, I shouldn't sit here and try to humor you by coming up with as many ways as possible I can childishly insult Musk. I'm not that type of lazy content creator. So instead, I'll say this. He often responds to valid objections, criticism, and accusations with, "You're an idiot," in place of providing an actual defense. It should rile me up even more, but I can't help but feel just overwhelming apathy at the fact that he doesn't get this simple idea. If he just decided to be a nicer person, if he decided to appear more reasonable, to explain himself, I doubt there'd really be a subculture of a subculture dedicated to digging up dirt and hating on him. Being respectful hardly takes any effort, and seriously considering criticism benefits both parties. I'll admit though that that's only a take that would work pre-corona, as his rhetorical skills have been put on the back burner while his previously discussed Rockefeller-style extortion and controversial premises have brought him front and center recently. But let's work our way up. One thing Elon is known for is that, well, despite his company being named Tesla rather than Edison, he doesn't like to give credit to people. He wants to be the hero, the genius. He feels the need to prove that even though, I personally think he's smarter than the vast majority of the population, disregarding soft skills, of course. You know, it almost reminds me of some of the most cringeworthy qualities on Michael Scott, but at least Michael has the decency to not expunge the original author's name after he tacked on his own. Musk has a tendency not to credit artists. I'm not talking about the stunt with the farting unicorn. I'd recommend looking into that yourself because it seems like a gray area when only considering Musk and the artist, and it was settled with both parties seemingly happy. Instead, Elon got into some hot water relatively recently when he tweeted a picture of Nier Automata's 2B. I don't know how to say it. He responded to requests to credit the artist with, quote, "No." And then he would go on to claim that people crediting artists is, quote, destroying the medium. If it's as easy as Elon implies to just reverse image search to find the original artist, why doesn't he do that? For such a smart man, I feel condescending to explain that adding the artist in the tweet is going to lead to a lot more exposure for the original Frenchman that probably spent hours making this beautiful piece of art. And it's the least a man with almost 40 million followers could do. It takes seconds. It doesn't detract from the original piece at all. You can find the artist at mmprod.artstation.com, by the way, but in the aftermath of the backlash Elon received for this, he, well, I hate to use the word, but he kind of threw a tantrum and threatened to delete his Twitter account. Not very mature. He's actually done something sort of like this relatively recently, tweeting out cancel culture before the internet discovered a photo of him with Ghislaine, Mr. Epstein's associate, Mrs. Maxwell, after which the backlash was so bad that he pleaded, "Please take a moment to report accounts clearly engaged in harassment. It is the only way to maintain public discourse." In isolation, I might have sympathized with this tweet, but due to both Elon's established lack for discourse and the severity of the allegation, I'm afraid I can only say, look, I'll have to say a lot of demonetizable words if I want to deep dive into this, and I can't actually find anything that concrete on Elon's connections to Maxwell or Epstein, so let's just move on. Staying on the subject of credit, remember that huge battery installation in South Australia? In response to this post calling out astroturfing on the accomplishment, Reddit user Saruko sums it up best. Musk did not build the batteries, nor did Tesla, nor were they produced at the Gigafactory, nor did Panasonic, who are Musk's partners in the Gigafactory. Samsung delivered the industrial batteries to Australia under contract. That's like Papa John's claiming they'll deliver your pizza in 40 minutes or it's free, and then ordering you Domino's. Alright, my golly, finally some hate I can actually debunk. I genuinely fell for this too, but no, Elon did not technically buy the title of the founder of Tesla. No. He heavily invested in the Series A round of funding, ending up the chairman on the board of directors. Then once the original CEO was ousted, he just started calling himself the founder. Hey, fake it till you make it, I guess. But then he was shortly sued by one of the actual founders, resulting in a private settlement out of court, the details of which are likely never to be known. The only thing we know is that it was decided that there are legally 5 people with the title of founder, Musk being one of them. Oh, he also got very upset early on in the company's history when the then CEO, who's also the guy that would go on to sue him, was getting drastically more press attention than him, writing in an email that Tesla needs to correct this perception and give Elon some of the credit, or publicity rather, that he's supposedly deserved for some design features and being the largest investor by far. Well, I feel that I, along with the majority of the population, would undeniably have some distaste in Musk's situation, but what shows his lack of maturity, at least at the time, was his inability to come to terms with the fact that it was fruitless and childish to get mad at the media for treating the CEO as, well, the head of the company. Instead of debunking, I think I just made it worse. Anyway, moving on. I feel like the Thai cave incident from a while back has been covered in depth as it went much more viral than, say, union busting, so all I'll do is this. I'd like to remind you that when Musk was accused of only wanting publicity in his impractically high-tech plan to assemble a mini-submarine for the rescue of about a dozen Thai children trapped in a winding underwater cave, he called the accuser, British cave diver Vern Unsworth, a pedophile. He doubled down on it too, and after subsequently facing a defamation suit, he stood his ground that it was an insult and nothing more. Musk actually ended up winning the suit. Personally, was it indicative of his character? Yes. Uncalled for? Yes. Crude? Yes. The crime of defamation? Well, I don't really think anyone saw his tweet as anything more than another Twitter fit. It also helped his case that supposedly pedo is a common insult in South Africa, but I don't really want to get my mom to verify that. I would end this part on a positive note by saying at least Musk had to pay for his lawyers as punishment, but yeah, didn't make much of a dent. Now, let's fully shift from credit to perception. This video is getting long and I already pulled the lightning round gag, so you know what? I'm just going to show you the list from elonmusk.today, a website that is dedicated to gathering all of the false promises Elon has made. I think it's more like in general spurious claims that don't really need a day count, but here's the list. If you're listening to this and can't tab back, I'll read out some of my favorites as it scrolls by. He claimed that there'd be close to 0 new coronavirus cases by the end of April. It's been 468 days that he said that by this year there'd be 1 million Tesla robo-taxis on the streets. It's been 700 days since Elon said the Tesla Gigafactory will be 100% solar powered by the end of 2019. He also promised his own tequila and candy shop. But I gotta say, my absolute favorite has got to be the tweet, quote, "Tesla will never have to raise capital again," end quote, which is only continuously more disproven as time goes on. Elon frequently makes claims like these. I could excuse his behavior, but at the end of the day, he seems to lack the realization that his Twitter carries a lot more weight and importance than pretty much any other person. You could even argue that, as opposed to Trump, Elon has actually gotten into legal trouble for a tweet, for example, tweeting that Tesla would go private at $420 a share. Yet he hasn't learned his lesson. He extrapolates from his genius with computers to expect the same fluke success and unheard of advancement in his companies, not to mention expecting himself to have the same genius with other subjects like coronavirus, where he says things like children are completely immune to it. Musk has been given a plethora of ways to prove either his virtue or the extent of his vanity, and it seems he always chooses the latter. It's an understatement to say that he was very much outspoken against people taking proper precautions to prevent the spread of COVID, at one point opening back up his gigafactory against county rules, telling workers they could stay home if they wanted, firing them anyway, and tweeting things like, "Free America." I'm really just setting up the ventilator fiasco, but I'm not sure I can come to a decisively negative conclusion on it. Yes, he sent devices that could be best described as breathing facilitators that are about 1/50th the cost of ventilators, but supposedly the hospitals receiving them knew what they were getting, agreed anyway, and have been using them for less serious cases. I can't find a source for this, but I swear I saw a breakdown somewhere explaining that it would have been bad PR to either refuse or not thank Musk, which I don't find very compelling. I still have quite a bone to pick with this, though, considering that he's clearly shown himself as a willing philanthropist, but his fortune remains tidy while coronavirus still spreads across America. My napkin math roughly equates the cost of the machines to at most $1 million of his multi-billion-dollar fortune. This is a topic for another day, but this is just a taste as to why people say it's intrinsically immoral to be a billionaire. Sure, he won the game of capitalism, and you'd think you'd want to keep your prize for winning it too. But when there's suffering and adversity like this in the world, and you're sitting on your dragon's pile of wealth more than you could ever imagine spending, is that money really in the right place? Let's move on to more recent topical tweets like this one. Despite receiving government aid in the pandemic, Musk tweeted that a second US government stimulus package is not in the best interest of the people. Someone replied, "You know what isn't in the best interest of the people? The US government organized a coup against Evo Morales in Bolivia so that you could obtain lithium there." Musk tweeted back, quote, "We will coup whoever we want, deal with it." Okay. Let's put greater context and history lessons aside for a moment. I touched on this previously, but Musk doesn't seem to grasp that being the 5th richest person on the planet, being CEO of 3 companies, having almost 40 million Twitter followers, entitles him to some level of expected dignity, expected seriousness. I can't think of an eloquent way to say this other than, dude, you can't joke about that. Call me a snowflake, call me a liberal, call me anything you want, but I think it's sensible that you do not joke in the face of an allegation as serious as being an agent in the obstruction of democracy, especially in the banishment of the first indigenous president of Bolivia elected by the people. The whole thing being proven to be foul play by the far-right Bolivian faction and the US government on so-called claims of fraud that would go on to be disproven. Why is that not okay to joke about? Am I getting offended for indigenous Bolivians? Well, it's not okay to joke about because, surprise, surprise, Elon is planning on expanding the Gigafactory domain to include Brazil, where he planned to import lithium from Bolivia already. The coup was pretty suspicious considering this, and Bolivians were even protesting in the streets while Musk tweeted that, so yeah, saying something that flippant is, well, questionable. The South African billionaire eventually gathered the sense to delete it. He then made a follow-up tweet clarifying Tesla gets its lithium from Australia. Yeah. What? Are you expecting me to say they don't? Yeah, this issue doesn't really go any further than a suspicious joke that shows Elon's tone deafness, well, of course aside from environmental concerns about lithium mined in the land down under, but we don't have to get into that. Moving on, everyone has buttons that can be pushed. Let me be transparent about the creator of this video for a moment, and disclose that I don't think I can hide my bias for this next part. Ever since the Dinosaur saga has led to some remarks about how calm I seem doing these videos, I've always wondered if I just don't have that spark that other people do when it comes to contentious issues. If all goes according to plan, I might put a lot more effort into my intonation during this video, but at no point in this script has it really been apparent I feel that I have a genuine burning anger. My mother has even made similar remarks about my temperament in general in the past. But the comments section on this tweet has disproved this notion entirely. I'm referring to, of course, the infamous "pronouns suck" tweet that Musk's wife took an issue with. So the people listening in the background, I'm not going to read these screen caps out loud. I have a zero tolerance policy for the verbal defecation like this that people seem comfortable posting for some reason. I don't really think there's any amount of neutral discussion or points I can raise that will get people to support human rights, that will get people to not say that they would prefer that trans people commit suicide than get proven treatment. Let me pull this back towards Musk. Honestly, when I saw this tweet for the first time, I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was at worst an intentionally vague spam post. But reading through the replies has left me with a bitter taste. I could flame him for allowing these people filled with such prejudice and hate to have a platform, temporary as it might be, but instead I'll say this. If Elon's true intentions were anti-preferential pronouns here, I find that deplorable and irredeemable, and I think it's saddening that I can't come to a logical conclusion here on a subjective issue that essentially divides the population based on morals and empathy, or complete lack thereof. Quote, I was a starter wife inside America's messiest divorce. Published in 2010, long after Elon divorced his first wife Justine, it's an interesting piece. Maybe read it on your own time, but it's very telling of the man behind SpaceX, Tesla, and the Boring Company. But first, let me theorize. Elon's Afrikaner father has probably shaped the younger Musk a lot more than he's comfortable admitting. He tries at every corner to distance himself from Errol, not even letting his children interact with him. Errol Musk was the abusive, overbearing patriarch of the family, and it didn't help that he was a lot more than the breadwinner too, as he brought home a lot more than bacon. I don't find it unfathomable that the toxically male-dominated culture of his native country and his father acting as a statue to ambition both made him into the man he is today. Elon met his first wife in college, but he would only tie the knot much later. Right from the beginning, Justine describes him as proving himself to be a man that does not take no for an answer, citing his clear determination to court her early on. But in their relationship, Musk began to grow domineering, controlling, and soon it became apparent that Justine had faded into the sidelines. She became nothing more than a trophy wife, one Elon demanded to go blonder and blonder, unsatisfied with her whole being down to her hair color. At the wedding, she signed away her financial rights, legally reinforcing what Musk had brutally told her anyway. Quote, I am the alpha in this relationship. The blossoming then millionaire told her he found her lacking, to which she would tell him repeatedly, I am your wife, not your employee, to which Elon would reply without fail, if you were my employee, I would fire you. Justine is a writer. The qualities that Elon found attractive in her, like her determination and ambition, made her a terrible trophy wife, which ultimately became the role that Elon Musk needed her to fill. She was expected to smile and nod while the men were talking. The expectations of her were so much that when she came to after a car crash, quote, her first thought wasn't, thank God nobody's hurt, it was, my husband is going to kill me. I would certainly be remiss after proving allegation after allegation that I didn't talk about Elon himself. More specifically, the fact that he is so successful. Really just so captivating. I'm not gonna lie, even after researching this video, if he knocked on my door and wanted to whisk me away, I mean, I'd be down. There's just something about the charismatic, exotic-sounding, self-made hard worker making it bigger beyond anyone's wildest dreams in the land of the American dream, isn't there? I was originally going to do a section debunking his claims of hard work and intelligence, but the people that aren't lowly factory workers all describe him as brilliant, unconventionally brilliant, diligent to a fault even, and as perhaps the most industrious man on the planet. His ex-wife compared him to, when they were happy together, her own private Alexander the Great. It's the lofty, opulent metaphor, but I can't say it's unfounded. Even after the divorce, she calls him brilliant and visionary. Again, I said I wasn't going to toot his horn at the beginning of the video, but I feel like there was a tacit expectation for me to dive into Elon's intelligence and work ethic. Yes, he gets undue praise for the inventions of his engineers, like all CEOs, but still, there's a common theme with deep dives I've been reading on Musk. Even Wired, the paper that he's denounced in the past, says this in their piece titled Dr. Elon and Mr. Musk, Life Inside Tesla's Production Hell. Quote, as a leader, Musk managed by example, by working hard, demanding perfection, thinking in unconventional ways, and insisting the inconceivable could be accomplished if it was simply reduced to logical steps. He's someone who empowers you to be better than you think you can be, said Ton Marin, who was Tesla's general counsel for 5 years until the company said earlier this month that he would be leaving. He has extraordinarily high standards, and so he pushes you to be your absolute best. Similar sentiments were expressed by other executives and managers. He is the smartest person I've ever met, said a former executive at Solar City. I can't tell you how many times I prepared a report for him, and he asked a question that made us realize we were looking at the problem completely wrong. It's ironic. At the beginning of this video, I went at length about how he represents what we all want, who we all want to be, and a little bit of who we are. That was about half an hour ago for you and some days ago for me. I was preparing to laugh at his claims of working around the clock as CEO of multiple companies. No one could possibly do that for so long, right? But I'm writing this at 8:30 a.m., waking up only to see this project stretch into its third or fourth day. I don't know, I can't remember. If anything, as a driven computer science major and the child of an Afrikaner and an engineer too, I should idolize Musk, shouldn't we all? Shouldn't we praise the man who represents the virtue American society holds dearest, industry? Or if you prefer, grandeur? I'm hoping that you, the viewer, shouted a resounding no. But still, somehow I think a sanctimonious, holier-than-thou, airy conclusion where I say that brilliance does not excuse extortion would be uncalled for here. Instead, I'll say this. No person, especially no public figure, is flawless, and no, I'm not going to counter that banal conclusion I mentioned with just the other cliche I suggested, though I still do seriously want you to take it for what it truly means. There's a reason people like Keanu Reeves are so idolized. The fraction of successful people in this world that don't have some kind of dirt is infinitesimal. You could find some gas-worthy flaws in just about everyone, from misogynistic Gandhi's obsession with sex to Churchill's white supremacy to Aristotle's belief that women are just deformed men. Should these figures, Elon included, be wiped from history, cancelled into oblivion? No. Should we as a modern society forever moving forward have the maturity to denounce these fatal flaws as the wretched, horrible, outdated views that they are, while acknowledging that we would not be where we are today without the figures themselves? I think so, for the most part, but I'm not quite sure about Elon. I could propose the question, what is there to life if everything you stand for is nullified by someone at your company a few degrees separated from you, naively ordering cobalt from some random mining company? But what Elon stands for is at best leading the world into a greener future, privatizing that change, and at worst seeking to extort wealth out of the momentum. But I think the latter is beyond far-fetched, at least to describe his primary motivation. Tesla and SpaceX were risks. Elon already made his PayPal fortune. Privatized or not, he is using the cards he was dealt, American capitalism and a lopsided world, to at least try to move forward. He could have chosen any of countless other industries, established industries. And yes, he's in it for the wealth and glory, undeniably, but he chose his industries on an admittedly admirable mission statement. Tesla's is, for example, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. If it were just for wealth and just for glory, he didn't have to pit himself against the immense technological challenges he faces. No, I'm not trying to pull a 180 and get on his good side so that he does end up coming to whisk me away. I can only dream. But I really do think that Elon, like Carnegie, Rockefeller, Ford, Steve Jobs even, are all inevitable agents of change, and that all humans inevitably succumb to their flaws. Augustin Burroughs puts it best. I am entirely made of flaws, stitched together with good intentions. I think we all are, for the most part. I think that's why people idolize Musk. I've considered throughout this entire video doing some sort of overarching thesis where I compare Musk to, say, Rockefeller, Alexander the Great, or even Michael Scott. But that would be a disservice to this extraordinarily unique man. I set out to take a neutral examination of allegations against him. I truly mean that. The title is just to draw you in. I never set out to make some defamatory gotcha piece. But most of these claims have been proven true to varying extents. And as I said at the beginning of the video, he is idolized by countless people, mindlessly praised and defended. That is why I made this. At one point, everyone must come to terms with the inherent inequity and intrinsic cruelty of the world, along with the imperfections of its many creatures. And imperfections Elon and his companies have many. I have given you some pieces from the bottom, darkest side of the Tesla iceberg. I've researched some pretty wretched things, and to appease the average person, I've still conceded his brilliance. I can only say now that I hope you make your own informed opinion. Yes, I know there are a lot of things I didn't get to, like his connections to Trump and his mercurial political views, but I'm going to be quite honest. I don't want to sink any more hours into this than I'm projecting the rest of this will take, because I fully expect this to flop. In the dejection following the failure of my most recent video that I put a lot of effort into, I thought I'd return to my roots and do a debunking bandwagon hate style video, but with a bit less debunking than usual. I guess I'm bunking the hate. If you would like to learn about the history of College Board and the SAT in a lighthearted format, look up the articles yourself. You do the work. Anyway, in all seriousness, I think I do enjoy this format of video, but it's hard to find topics where it applies. I'd also like to dedicate this video to my high school English teachers. Thank you Anhalt, Owen, Chase, Johnson, and even Collins for getting me to the point where I'd write a 14-page long script for basically a research paper and not regret it. Thanks for watching.